If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not dishonor or others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always preserves. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
Our theme this morning is love. So I thought I might begin by giving you a little insight into my love life over the last week. Last Sunday, I got some lovely flowers from the APCM. Thank you, St Mary of Bethany Church. These are beautiful. I love them. Monday morning, furry nose appears in my face. Bessie, I love you. Bessie's my dog, by the way. Tuesday, my friend sends me a selfie of her new dress. I love it. It looks great on you. And later in the day, I discover a couple of TV programs I like watching are actually on a Tuesday evening. That's my day off. I can watch them live. I love it when that happens. Wednesday for me always has a Monday morning kind of feel. Thankful for coffee. I love coffee. Thursday, some things I didn't know the answer to, tasks that I'm just not very good at. I love being part of a team. Friday, the sun came out just as I put my washing on the line. Oh, I just love it when that happens. Saturday, yesterday, got a copy of a book in the post that one of my best friends had authored. And so I texted her and said, I'm so proud of you. I love you. Sunday, that's today, I'm here with all of you online and in the building. I love being able to worship together. Flowers, my dog, my friend's dress, live TV, coffee, team, sunshine, my friends worshipping together. There's a lot of love in my life. But I don't think I use the word love in exactly the same way in each of those different situations. I don't think it means exactly the same thing every time I use it. If the house was on fire and I had to get one thing, it would of course be the dog, not my cup of coffee or, the flowers from the APCM. And I love worshipping together and being part of a staff team far more than I love watching live TV, you'll be relieved to know. The Bible reading we heard this morning is the one most frequently chosen at weddings. And that's not surprising, it's a reading about love. However, I think the fact that it's so associated with weddings means that we often forget, or perhaps don't even realize, that it's not actually about romantic love. Whilst we use the word love in a variety of contexts to mean a variety of different things, ancient Greek had several words, three of which are used in the New Testament. And the word that's translated as love here in this passage is agape. And Paul, who's the writer of this letter to the Corinthian church, to the Corinthians, uses the word agape to mean universal love or unconditional love. So agape love is absolutely applicable in romantic relationships, and it's entirely appropriate to have this passage read at a wedding. But let's not let that distract us from the fact that this is a Bible reading for all of us, every single one of us. It's the love that's at the heart of being a Christian, and that all of us are called to live out. This isn't love that we might have for someone because they're a family member. There's another Greek word for that, storge. This isn't the love we have for someone as a friend because we share a mutual interest with them. There's another Greek word for that too. This isn't the love we have for someone because we're in love with them. This is the love not of feelings, but of choosing how we live and how we act and how we relate to one another. This is the love of Christian community, of Christian living, of every person belonging, being an equal member of the family of God, a love that is other-focused, where in every encounter we see each other's great value and worth to God. And it's in this love that we exercise our spiritual gifts. So what does the passage have to say to us as we think about our different but also vital and important spiritual gifts? I have 3 points: the importance of love, the nature of love, and the future of love. So that's where we're going over the next few minutes. So the importance of love. To better understand the context of this passage, I think it's helpful if we look back just one verse to the end of chapter 12, 1 Corinthians 12, verse 31, which we heard read to us last week. And it says this: "Now eagerly desire the greater gifts, and yet I will show you the most excellent way." The Christians in Corinth have become overly concerned with their different and individual gifts. Status is being attached to specific gifts, and some spiritual gifts, perhaps the more visible ones, are being elevated above others. This sense of competition, of some members being superior and some gifts being more important or valuable, is causing division in the Corinthian church. And Sarah helped us to think about that last week, so do have a listen to her talk online if you've not heard that. Now, commentators vary on how verse 31 should be understood, but it's likely that Paul is saying something like, "Go ahead, guys, pursue the greater gifts, and now I'm going to tell you what the greater gifts are. The greater gifts are the gifts of love, of living and acting and relating in love. Love is the greatest spiritual gift, and it's the universal gift, one that everyone can pursue." So now eagerly desire the greater gifts isn't attached to what's gone before and saying, yes, you should elevate different gifts to different status. It's attached to what is to come. Now pursue the greater gifts, and I'm going to tell you what that is, and that's love. So chapter 13 begins with 4 examples of what it means for love to be the most excellent way. Paul takes some of the gifts mentioned in chapter 12 and says that even the best expression, one commentary uses the word dulux, I think, even the top of the range version of these spiritual gifts is nothing without love. Speaking in human tongues is nothing without love. And even speaking in angelic tongues, if that's even possible, you might consider that the ultimate expression of the spiritual gifts of tongues. Actually, even angelic tongues has no value without love. We might better understand the expression of being like a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal as being like a piano with one key or a guitar with one string. Similarly, neither the gift of prophecy nor the dulux version of being able to fathom all mysteries and all knowledge have any value without love. And the same with faith. You can have faith so great and strong that it moves mountains. Even that doesn't give you any special status. What matters is love. Now, the final example might surprise us a little, because Paul says that even giving everything to the poor, if you're doing it because you think it will make you look good or get a special reward, you're wrong. Without love, it is meaningless. Even giving everything to the poor is meaningless if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, without love. This is a passage not about showing love, but about having love. Not about showing love, but about having love. It's about living and acting and relating in a culture of love. Not about being seen to be being loving. I think that's important. This is about choosing and committing and recommitting, and if you're anything like me, you'll be recommitting every minute of every hour of every day. It's about choosing and committing in our hearts and our minds to a way of being and living where the most important gift is that of love. Paul has told the Corinthian Christians that every single one of them belongs, that every gift is equally valuable, that diversity in the body should be celebrated. But these things can't happen without love. You can pick your own illustration here. How many Sundays does that happen? Pick your own illustration. Baking, music, bread making, art, makeup, sewing, DIY, photography. It's not enough to have all the resources or all the materials or all the elements or all the ingredients. A cake or a project or whatever it is requires an understanding of relationship. What's needed where and when and in what quantity. How different things work together. Everybody's spiritual gifts existing in community, which reflects and points to God's renewed humanity, requires a culture of agape love. So that's the first point, the importance of love. Now on to the nature of love. I should have said this follows quite nicely in the passage. The first point is verses 1 to 3. We've just looked at 1 to 3. We're now on to 4 to 7, the nature of love. What does this love look like? Love is patient. Love is kind. In New Testament Greek, these are verbs. Love is being patient. Love is being kind. One is characterized by the absence of something, by forbearance, and the other by the presence of something, by kindness. And they point to God's love and forgiveness characterized by mercy, the withholding of what's deserved, and grace, the giving of what's undeserved. The love we are called to show one another is love that reflects the love that God shows us. Then follows a list of things that love is not. And it's likely that Paul's reason for using the negative to describe the nature of love is because these are specific things that are happening amongst the Christians in Corinth. Love doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not proud, does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, is not easily angered, and keeps no record of wrongs. This is what a culture of some gifts being seen as more valuable or important than others leads to. When we pursue status, or when we want to look good to others, or even when we feel we need to earn God's favour by being the best Christian, whatever that means. We're all on journeys as disciples, but there's no such thing as a better or a worse Christian, and yet I think we sometimes think like that. These things lead to us comparing ourselves to and competing with those around us. And when that happens, we end up envying others, boasting about ourselves, acting in ways that we know are disrespectful to others, putting our own needs before those of others. We feel resentment, we hold grudges. We can even be pleased when someone else gets something wrong. It's not hard to see how this list of things that love is not are so harmful to Christian community. And yet the roots of such unloving ways of acting and relating are pursuing status and favour, comparing and competing. Such easy things for us to fall into doing. Ultimately, the nature of love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Injustice has no place in love. Love rejoices only when our relationships with each other and with God are characterized by God's righteousness. And in case the task of being a community characterized by love is now feeling unattainable, Paul reminds the Christian Corinthians and us to keep looking to God. Love always protects, which could be translated as doesn't give up or give in to the pressures of the world. Love always trusts, not a naive trust in other people, but trust in God. Love always hopes, again, not a naive hope in circumstances, but hope founded on God's promises. And love keeps on going. Which brings us to the final point, the future of love. And as I say, we're moving nicely through the passage. We're at verse 8 now, verses 8 to 13 we're going to have a look at. Love should be pursued above all else. It's more important than any other spiritual gift because love will last beyond this lifetime. Perfect love will characterize eternity with God. Love never fails. Love will never come to an end. The gifts of prophecy, tongues, knowledge are temporary, but love is permanent. Paul's reference to maturity is not, at least in this instance here, a challenge to the Corinthian Christians, but simply a reminder that they, and Paul and us, are on a journey. They've not arrived, even though some of them might think that they have. Even with their spiritual gifts, their knowledge is still limited, and they don't have all the answers. And the same is true for Paul, and the same is true for us. The gifts Paul mentions are all gifts concerned with communication with and knowledge of God. Tongues, prophecy, knowledge. And they're perfectly good and appropriate gifts for the church in Corinth and the church now. But there'll simply be no need for these gifts around communicating with and knowing God in God's perfect and complete new creation when we're living with him. Those gifts just won't be needed. And God's glorious future shapes how we live in the present. The divisions and tensions around spiritual gifts were very focused on the now, being the most spiritual or the most important now. And it's almost as though Paul is saying, do you realize you're comparing and disagreeing and fighting over temporary gifts that have been given for, ironically, the building up of the church until Christ comes again? Faith, hope, and love are gifts that point the Christian Corinthians and us to God's future. And love is the greatest because in God's future, love will reign. Faith and hope will have to find new expressions when we're living in God's eternal kingdom. Love will reign. Whilst this is known as the beautiful reading of weddings, I have to say I find this a very hard passage to preach on, as I'm all too aware of the ways in which I fall short of the way of love. I'll give you a very trivial example. The first line of that section on the nature of love, love is patient. I took my driving test 6 times, and I failed the first 5 times for failure to make progress along the road. I think that means going too slow. So you'd think I know what it means to be patient, and yet now that I've been driving for however many years I've been driving for, I'm really not very patient when someone's waiting to pull out and I think there's a gap big enough that they should have pulled out in. And I'm the person that failed 5 times for failure to make progress along the road. Now that's a silly example, but it is a reminder that we ought to check in with ourselves that some of the things that we maybe think we do or think we should be good at, or, oh yeah, I know what it means to be patient. Actually, do we really? N.T. Wright offers us a helpful exercise for reflecting on this passage, specifically verses 4 to 7. He suggests reading through this passage slowly, a line at a time, and considering three things. Firstly, the way we see the quality in Jesus. Secondly, the way in which we see it, or possibly don't see it, in ourselves. And thirdly, the way in which, if we did live up to the standards of love in this passage, it would work out in practice. So, one, how we see it in Jesus. Two, how we see or don't see it in ourselves. Three, if it was in ourselves and we did live up to these standards, what would that look like in our interactions, in our acting, in our relating? And not to do this exercise to feel good about ourselves, oh, I'm a very loving person, or to feel rubbish about ourselves, oh, I'm a very unloving person, but doing it in prayer and asking for God's grace to show us situations where we could behave differently and what steps we might need to take to make that happen. I wonder if we might each consider undertaking this exercise in whatever way feels helpful for us, as we seek to be a community where every person belongs and where every encounter is one where we see each other's great value and worth to God. Amen.